A lot of people think this man's death is a work of art. Why? His name was Bas Jan Ader. On July 9th, 1975, he set sail from Chatham, Massachusetts, a seaside town at the southeastern tip of Cape Cod, looking to cross the Atlantic Ocean alone in a 13-foot sailboat to England, where the plan was to then travel to his home country of the Netherlands. This photo was taken by his wife, Mary Sue Ader Anderson, at the launch of the journey. The ultimate destination was the Groninger Museum in the Netherlands, where he was set to have an exhibition of his work. Ader was a conceptual artist. Before his departure, he had arranged to have a choir sing sea shanties at a gallery in Los Angeles. A similar performance was planned for his arrival at the museum in the Netherlands. But on April 18, 1976, 10 months after his journey had started, the crew of a Spanish fishing trawler discovered a small sailboat about 150 nautical miles away from Ireland. Now, it wasn't obviously a sailboat at first, because it was floating vertically, with its bow submerged in the water. They hoisted the boat onto their deck and saw it was called Ocean Wave, and they found several forms of ID in the cabin, all of them belonging to one Bas Jan Ader. Because of the barnacles attached to the Ocean Wave, the captain of the Spanish fishing trawler estimated that it had probably been adrift for about half a year. The artist's body was never found. But why does this lead many people to believe his disappearance and likely death was a work of art? To quote the art website Hyperallergic, the discovery of Ader's boat sparked a fetishistic fascination with his disappearance. A lot of people were convinced that Ader had gone missing on purpose as a kind of perfect piece of performance art, and that he was still alive and well, living in a new location somewhere. Or that Ader's journey was a deliberate suicide and the ultimate artistic masterwork. And there were reasons to believe both of these things. You've already seen a clip of what is possibly Bas Jan Ader's most notable work. I'm Too Sad to Tell You consists of this 3-minute black and white film in which he silently cries, but also several photographs and postcards that he sent to his friends with only those words written on them. I'm too sad to tell you. Another body of work was the Fall series, which is a set of films, all of them shot in one take, with no camera movement. Fall 1, Los Angeles, depicts Ader sitting on a chair, but the chair is on the roof of his house. He leans over to the side, too far to stay balanced, and as a result rolls off the roof and lands in some bushes on the ground below. Fall 2, Amsterdam, shows a road next to a canal. Ader comes bicycling into the frame, then suddenly swerves dramatically into the water. Both of these films end before we see Ader re-emerge. Basically, you might say, he disappears. These are staged disappearances. Another film is called Broken Fall Organic. It shows him hanging off a tree branch above a creek for a good while, until he inevitably runs out of strength and falls into the water. It seems pretty clear that these works are concerned with natural forces exerting themselves on vulnerable human life. Or maybe you could say that they seem to be about deterministic fate. Bas Jan Ader's journey across the Atlantic was part of an intended triptych of sorts, entitled In Search of the Miraculous. The first part of this project, In Search of the Miraculous, One Night in Los Angeles, photographically documents Ader as he walks around the city, I guess searching for some kind of miracle, whatever that might mean. Each photograph features handwritten lyrics from an old song by the Coasters called Searchin'. The final image in the series shows Ader at the beach by the enormous ocean. These photographs were exhibited at a gallery in LA, and then the second part of the work was Ader traveling across that huge ocean. And the third part was supposed to be another exhibit in the Netherlands of much of the same material, though probably with some additions. There is a prevailing sense that one of the themes that Ader is exploring in his work is this idea of him being Dutch American, although more specifically I think just being someone who is sort of between two homes. I think a lot of us who are immigrants can relate to this feeling of not quite being home and missing home, but also feeling like when we go back to that old home, it's sort of no longer there. And so for a lot of people who have moved from one country to another, there is this element of never quite belonging, or maybe a feeling of having two different ways of belonging to two different places or points in time. When Bas Jan Ader stands there looking out across the ocean, one imagines that he's thinking about all of this, that he's standing on the ground of his current home, wondering about his other home in the Netherlands. And so it's interesting that this journey across the Atlantic was conceived as an artwork that connects these two realities in a sense. And between these two realities, these two grounds to stand on, a huge, seemingly bottomless ocean. It wasn't long after his boat was discovered that rumors started circulating that Bas Jan Ader had crafted a disappearance, much like what he had been doing in his art all along. And maybe the fact that his boat was actually stolen just within a month of it being discovered helped fuel this idea that Ader had crafted a kind of disappearing act magic trick. But the main reason people mythologized, I think, is that Ader's work essentially invites mythologizing. I mean, a project called I'm Too Sad to Tell You kind of makes you go, too sad to tell me what? In Search of the Miraculous makes you wonder exactly what kind of miracle Ader is looking for and why he needs a miracle in the first place. There appears to be a theme of what we might call inevitable failure that connects his artwork, and nowhere does that seem more dramatically present than in his journey across the Atlantic. Hyperallergic quotes a 2009 exhibition catalog from the Museum of Modern Art that describes Ader as a tragic daredevil and an anachronistic poetic wanderer. The initial rumors of a perfectly executed disappearance, I think, became less and less realistic as the years went by. The conclusion that Ader must have died became harder and harder to push away. I think it is natural to assume, or at least to wonder, if his death was preconceived as the most logical conclusion to his series of works. Or at least that Ader was playing the odds, setting into motion an artwork that had two possible outcomes to be determined by an indifferent, impartial ocean. However, his wife Mary Sue Ader, widowed after Bas Jan's disappearance, believed that her husband had every intention of completing the trip. She had asked him about it and was convinced by his answer. Lending credence to this view is the fact that Ader was actually a very experienced sailor who had completed a transatlantic journey before, albeit in a larger vessel. It's also been shown that Ader spent significant time and effort making several adjustments to the small boat, making it stronger and more seaworthy. Why bother with all that if the plan was to perish? And then there's also the fact that Ader made all kinds of plans and agreements and preparations for what was to happen after his journey was complete. Now, I'm just a guy who's been reading a bit about all of this, and I'm in no way an expert. But it seems to me that calling his death a work of art is a bit too definitive and maybe too callous in a way. What I'm left with is an impression that Bas Jan Ader was a man who was comfortable with, or at least willing to grapple with, the frailty of life. I think that rather than aiming to die, Ader was aiming to live. But I mean live with a capital L. You know, personally, I'm content with sitting on the couch and eating sushi and watching Love is Blind or whatever. But there are moments when you go, am I really living? It seems like Bas Jan Ader was living. And living, really living, is risky business. I think what one might certainly say is that Bas Jan Ader is an artist who died for his art.